In 2011, Uriah Faber bounced back from a competitive loss at UFC 132 by choking the fuck out of Brian Bowles, while Cruz dominated Demetrius Johnson, setting up a highly anticipated rubber match between Cruz and Faber. A stint on The Ultimate Fighter finally gave us a fleshed-out look at the dynamic between these bitter rivals, and it was a hilarious combination of civility, familiarity, respect, and sheer and utter fucking disdain. You ever been on one of those family drives where the parents load the kids into the back of the car with the intentions of having a lovely family day out? But the kids just start bickering away, picking at each other, until eventually the dad turns around and threatens to spank the fuck out of their asses if they don't knock it off. Well, that pretty much sums up Uriah and Dominick's rivalry. Two kids bickering in the backseat of a car.
Well, take the fact that you're living right now because there's rules in MMA. If there weren't,
you're gonna go there again, man.
Well, I'm just saying.
You wouldn't have a leg.
Is that intimidating? This is
you got slept by Mike Brown. There's a lot of people that let you live in that mindset.
Wrong.
Right.
Okay.
You're saying Mike Brown didn't sleep.
So what I'm saying is
you weren't dragging your face up off the mat after Mike.
Watch the fight. No, I wasn't actually.
He let you live in that sense, if you want to word it that way. This isn't a death match.
Let's talk about
when
you've done that. Yeah, this is a simulated death match, and you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
Of all the rivalries, there's just something special about Cruz and Faber. As I said, a rare combination of civility and disdain. Unfortunately, the rubber match was cancelled. Cruz tore his ACL and was replaced by a monster in the midst of a meteoric rise. When Renan Barão stepped in to fight Faber for the interim belt, he was largely untested at the highest levels. But with one of the longest unbeaten streaks in the sport, and coming from the same camp as featherweight killer Jose Aldo, there was already a sense that the Bantamweight division may be entering a new era of Brazilian dominance. Renan seized the opportunity by fighting a smart tactical fight. He took Faber's power away with leg kicks and cautiously dismantled Uriah over the 5 rounds. It may not have been exciting, but capitalizing on Cruz's injury, Renan swooped in and snatched the crown from Uriah's grasp. An undeniable performance in a somewhat lackluster fight that was largely booed by the fans. That loss came at a time where the perception of Team Alpha Male as the perpetual bridesmaids was growing. A squad of well-rounded, highly trained elite athletes who just could not get a UFC belt. Faber lost to Cruz and Barão. Mendes lost to Aldo. Benavidez lost to Mighty Mouse. The greatest team of #1 contenders in the world. There was just something missing. We've all been coaching morning practice. Fighters coaching fighters. It's kind of hard to dedicate my time to coaching other fighters when I have to worry about my fight. I needed that next step, something to get me to that next level. We all came to Faber, and Faber agreed that we needed to find a head coach. I started writing down a huge list of guys that I thought would be great. Top of my list was Duane Ludwig. The appointment of Ludwig as head coach brought instant and transformative results. Overnight, Team Alpha Male fighters had smoother combinations, better economy of movement, more confidence in their strikes, and consequently more knockouts. 1 year after Ludwig started with Alpha Male, Fightnomics published statistics detailing the extent of the transformation. Win rate went from 67 to 93. Finish rate went from 36 to 69. KO rate went from 21 to 54. Total knockdowns doubled. In fact, by almost every metric, the team was simply outperforming themselves. But despite these vast improvements, Team Alpha Male were essentially in the exact same position. Every time one of their fighters found themselves in a title fight, they fell short. Benavidez lost to Mighty Mouse again. Faber lost to Barão again, further solidifying the perpetual bridesmaids moniker. However, in that last loss, Faber had the presence of mind to make a request. Hey, let's get my boy TJ Dillashaw in here to take care of my dirty work. TJ Dillashaw is an up-and-coming guy. If anyone deserves a shot, give it to him. and that was a request the UFC ultimately granted. Now, Dwayne parted ways with Alpha Male in May 2014, which was the same month TJ Dillashaw would take on Renan Barão. So Dwayne's last chance to capture a belt with Team Alpha Male, proving he had really taken the team to the next level and advertise his new gym in the process, looked like the longest of long shots. TJ Dillashaw, an Ultimate Fighter runner-up, a guy who was 1-1 in his last two, who only got the shot because Rafael Assunção was injured, was gonna take on Renan Barão? Don't even bother tuning in. This looked like a fucking squash match. After getting booed during his win over Faber, Barão stated, "I was a bit surprised, but that's a good message. Next time, I'll try to play a different game." And he followed up that win with 3 consecutive finishes, including a spinning back kick to the face of Eddie Wineland and a first-round knockout over Uriah Faber. Although not a carbon copy, the perception at the time was that Bantamweight had found its own Jose Aldo, a wicked striker with incredible takedown defense, and if you do secure a takedown, he might just tap the fuck out of your ass with his world-class Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. TJ was an 8-1 underdog. I thought that fight was a lamb being sent to the slaughter, and it was. But as it turns out, Renan Barão was that lamb. TJ went in there and molly-whopped the fuck out of Barão. Destroyed him in every aspect of the sport. Knockdowns, takedowns, submission attempts, before finally finishing him in the 5th round with a wicked head kick, a brutal flurry, and some follow-up ground and pound for good measure. Barão was not only beaten, but a style that had crushed the division on his ascent was rendered completely ineffective. In a state of confusion, Renan was battered for almost 23 minutes. Dillashaw was masterful. Joe Rogan called it the greatest performance I have ever seen in my life. And considering the opposition, that was not an outrageous claim. A perfect, flawless fucking victory over a monster. Faber was especially proud. His camp had finally reached the pinnacle of the sport, and he took a certain satisfaction in finally bucking the perpetual bridesmaid's moniker. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. People have been talking about the avoidance of the belt, this and that. But the UFC's only had our weight class for 3 years. So, we've had a couple of at-bats and just hit a grand slam as far as I'm concerned. And it's gonna keep coming. We're gonna keep the belts coming. We're gonna have a long tradition at Team Alpha Male. But Faber's celebrations were short-lived. TJ and Dwayne left Team Alpha Male, and the split was as acrimonious as the worst celebrity divorce. They were trading insults and taking shots at each other in the media. I mean, they almost got into a custody battle over Joseph Benavidez. One big, messy clusterfuck that added a whole new layer of drama and tension to an already simmering bantamweight division. But that's a subject for another time. Dillashaw was on fire. He beat a late replacement in Joe Soto and destroyed Barão in a rematch, all the while using a style at least somewhat modeled on Dominick Cruz. Many people felt we were looking at Cruz 2.0. Unpredictable footwork, confusing feints, strikes from awkward angles, but with much more power and aggression. The bantamweight division had a new king, and to many, he looked better than the old one. Dominick Cruz watched all this unfolding from the analyst desk. It must have been both infuriating and heartbreaking watching his prime slipping away while the champion was not only wearing his belt, but was clearly copying elements of his style. I mean, techniques Cruz had spent years developing and adapting for MMA were still on top of the game, but somebody else was implementing them and getting all the credit. Was TJ Dillashaw really an evolution or just an imitation? Only one way to find out. This was a grievance that could only be settled in the octagon. By the time Cruz was ready to answer that question, he had less than 2 minutes octagon time in 4.5 fucking years. At the time, I thought they were simply giving Cruz the shot to capitalize on the fact that he was momentarily healthy, cash in on his name quickly before he could re-injure himself. Because under the circumstances and despite his repeated denial of ring rust, stepping up to fight a dominant, dynamic champion on a murderous tear just looked like an unreasonable ask of the former champion. Cruz was gonna have to pull a fucking rabbit out of his ass. But as it turns out, he did have a new trick up his sleeve. During his time off, he had fine-tuned another skill. He had become one of the most cerebral analysts in the game, and when he applied that skill to trash talking, the effect was devastating. Cruz deconstructed his opponent's style, took their whole psychology apart like he was Sigmund Freud, identified and exploited any tensions in relationships, and used all those elements to comprehensively annihilate his opponents from every fucking angle. Cruz trash talking was so potent it was straight up sinister. He seems like the type of guy who could talk you into jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And TJ Dillashaw was the first man on the wrong end of this newly refined weapon. Much of the build-up unfolded in the format of TJ getting verbally molested, becoming visibly flustered, and flat out refusing to even engage. On paper, it was a glorious fucking matchup. Dillashaw had the opportunity to move out of Cruz's shadow and stake his claim as the undisputed Bantamweight king. Cruz, on the other hand, was trying to reclaim the crown he never lost, and in the process, make the statement that Dillashaw's reign was only possible by virtue of his absence, a byproduct of his misfortune. Cruz trash-talking appeared to pay immediate dividends. TJ came out more aggressive than usual, walked Cruz down looking to land big shots. Joe Rogan later asked TJ if the early headhunting was down to Cruz trash talking.
I wanted to finish him. I wanted to go out there and put a point on it, and things you learn from. Those are the small mistakes you learn from, and you change them up next time, and you come out there a little more level-headed.
This early aggression played right into Cruz's hands. For much of the early rounds, TJ stalked Cruz, who tagged TJ from the outside while just sliding out of range of Dillashaw's strikes. There's a lot of disagreement on the scoring of this fight, but for me, Cruz did just enough to win the first three. And although TJ adjusted in the fourth, taking Cruz's mobility away with leg kicks, finally landing some big shots, it was just too little too late. So just as the last video ended, so does this one, with Cruz well and truly on top of the game. In one of the greatest comeback wins of all time, Cruz edged the fight by the slimmest of margins. A split decision win, the return of the king.